This video is part of the Star Wars Defined series. Mauricio at Brown Table challenged all of film YouTube to answer the question, what single scene best captures the essence of Star Wars? And that is an amazing question, but sorry to say, I don't have an answer, because the scene I'm going to talk about today didn't so much define Star Wars as redefine it. But before we get into that, let's travel back in time 42 years. When Star Wars exploded onto the scene in 1977, the concept of a blockbuster movie was only 2 years old. The usage of that word to describe films entered the popular lexicon in the wake of the phenomenon that was Jaws. In 1975, Jaws came out and grossed $123 million at the North American box office, blowing past The Godfather's previous record of $86 million just 3 years earlier. Just 2 years after that, Star Wars came along and put Jaws to shame. It broke the Jaws record in just 6 weeks, eventually raking in $220 million at the box office. So in the span of 2 years, the record for highest grossing North American movie increased by a factor of 2.5x. Star Wars was so popular, it stayed in theaters for nearly a full calendar year. And when you adjust for inflation, Star Wars made more money in the North American box office than any movie ever by a wide margin. You thought Endgame was ubiquitous when it came out? Star Wars made nearly twice that amount of money in the United States and Canada. $850 million for Endgame versus $1.6 billion for Star Wars. It's impossible to overstate the magnitude of its cultural impact. It created a template that defines the modern era of blockbuster filmmaking. But even though that era is showing no signs of ending, the actual filmmaking craft on display in the original trilogy, the directorial style, the line delivery, the simplistic blocking, bears almost no resemblance to a modern action tentpole. It's hard to nail down the exact characteristics of this style. I'll save that discussion for another video, but you know it when you see it. It's in Indiana Jones, it's in The Goonies, it's in Ghostbusters, it's in the Richard Donner Superman movies, it's in Lethal Weapon, it's in the Keaton Batman movies. So when George Lucas went back to make the prequel movies, he of course used the style he and Spielberg had been using to great effect for over 20 years. But in a bit of truly terrible luck, the first movie of the prequel trilogy came out in 1999, the same year The Matrix came out and heralded a tectonic shift in action cinema. In my opinion, this is the real tragedy of the prequels. They were perfectly timed to redefine what a blockbuster could look and feel like for a new millennium and a new generation of moviegoers. But it didn't. In fact, it didn't even try. It was slavishly committed to a style of filmmaking that was in the autumn of its life. So it's not really a surprise that a moviegoer in 1999 who, in the previous couple years, had witnessed the absolute game-changing spectacles of Titanic, Saving Private Ryan, and The Matrix, is underwhelmed when they walk into episode 1 and see this.
Oh, he's the guy's bomb bag.
We're ambassadors for the Supreme Chancellor.
Your negotiations seem to have failed, Ambassador.
The negotiations never took place.
In terms of the filmmaking craft, this scene is indistinguishable from something in the original 1977 movie, which was 22 years old at that point. Audiences weren't able to look past the jilted dialogue and campy stylings. The prequels were stuck in the past. So when Disney bought Lucasfilm in 2012, they took on a nearly impossible challenge. How do you take the DNA of a franchise steeped in the 70s, the defining characteristics of Star Wars if you will, and transplant it into a movie with a decidedly modern aesthetic? Would the characters still feel like the characters we know and love? Would it have relevance in the era of the MCU? Would it feel like Star Wars? This scene is a masterpiece. J.J. Abrams packs in the iconography of the previous movies without winking at the audience. Every hit of nostalgia he drops is chased with a shot of something we've never seen before, something that would make the most jaded Star Wars fan turn to their neighbor in the theater and whisper, "That's awesome." Remember stormtroopers? Well, now they have flamethrowers, and chrome armor and feelings. Remember blaster shootouts? Well, here's the American sniper of Star Wars. Remember lightsabers? Now they look like this. Remember the evil guy with the black robes and the mask? Well, there's a new one, and he can stop blaster bolts in midair, which is the coolest thing ever! JJ turned in an action sequence beyond anything we've ever seen in the Star Wars universe. It's got the shaky cam of the Bourne movies, the horror aesthetics of Cloverfield, the lens flares of Star Trek, the dynamic blocking of Michael Bay, the man-on-the-ground grittiness of The Hurt Locker, and the quippy dialogue of the MCU.
So who talks first? You talk first? I talk first?
He took 38 years of advancements in action filmmaking and introduced them all into the world of Star Wars in an immaculate scene that feels less like a dumb action set piece and more like a bold declaration of, I know Star Wars, I know blockbusters, let's redefine what Star Wars can be. Hope you guys enjoyed that. I had an amazing time making it. I want to say thank you again to Mauricio from Brown Table for putting together the Star Wars Defined playlist. It is so great to have a chance to reach out to a new audience that might not otherwise find my stuff. I'm new to the video essay game, but I've got some great stuff coming up. I'm currently working on a Nando V Movies style rewrite of Frozen 2, so if that sounds interesting, then please subscribe. That should be out in about a week. I'm Colin, and may the Force be with you.